My name is Chris Wong. I'm the Senior Developer Evangelist here at Mapbox, and I'm joined by Jonathan Critchley, who is a Senior Map Designer. We're going to do Getting Started on Mapbox Studio today. If you're not familiar with Mapbox's entire suite of services, I recommend you go check out our website. A lot more than just maps and map design. We also have like full location-based search, navigation, and a rich array of data products. So please go take a look and see what else we have to offer. And also let us know what else you'd love to hear us do a Getting Started webinar episode about. One more little plug. This slide didn't come out quite the way I planned. And actually, oh, there it is. Okay, so we actually have a developers Discord community now that is pretty busy with activity, and we would love to have you join us. So if you can follow this bit.ly link, that's a great place to get some help, share what you're working on, and also we'd love to hear your ideas for content for the documentation system for these kinds of webinars, and basically everything that you need to be equipped and inspired to build with Mapbox. So we're going to be covering today this agenda for what is Mapbox Studio and how to use it. So we're going to explore the interface. We're going to work with datasets and tilesets. We're going to work with core style templates. We're going to learn about components and layers. I'll just, without further ado, turn it over to Jonathan Critchley, who's a senior map designer. He left his Twitter here if you want to make contact with him. And I'll just throw in a quick personal anecdote that Jonathan and I have been colleagues on Twitter in the mapping world for many years, and it's an honor to be working with him now at Mapbox. But I think that, it's a wonderful place to share what you're working on and find a community there as well. So don't hesitate to reach out. So I'll stop sharing. And without further ado, turn it over to Jonathan. Take it away. Sorry, before I go, the way this will work, I'll be monitoring chat and I'll interrupt or interject with questions. So go ahead and ask your questions in the chat as they come up, and I'll do my best to kind of moderate that and ask Jonathan, to stop and answer a question if there's one that if there's one ready to go. So see you in the chat, and take it away, Jonathan.
Thanks, Chris. Just make sure, I'm unmuted. So appreciate the intro. And as Chris mentioned, today we're just going to explore some of the things I feel are important getting started with Mapbox Studio. I'm a senior map designer at Mapbox and also based in Toronto, Canada. And feel free to reach out on Twitter, as Chris mentioned. Always sort of on the lookout for new and interesting things, and a great place to share work. So sort of primary question, what is Mapbox Studio? It's a web-based design platform to create custom maps, providing a complete suite of tools that allows users to customize the styles exactly to the brand needs and desired designs. So with Studio, you can modify your existing core style templates or create and style your own maps, importing your own data. Who's it for? It's really for cartographers, designers, developers looking to create custom map styles. Studio is really focused on allowing you to customize your base maps, which is the default map style that you want to display in your map application. It is worth keeping in mind interactions like clicking on a feature in your map, or for example, a map legend would need to be custom built using Mapbox SDKs and APIs, and they cannot be set up directly in Studio. So with Studio, you're really designing the base map, static base map, and then further sort of interactions and changes that you might want to make, you would do that on the client side using SDK and APIs. So what I have on the screen right now is a styles page, and it's what you'll see when you first log into Studio. And this lists all the styles you have in your account. And as you start designing styles, this is where they'll live, and this list will grow. From here, you have the option to organize existing styles and create new ones. And a really great recent addition that the Studio team made was adding folders to this page, which just really helps with our organization. I'm showing a relatively new account today, but on my own personal accounts, I have a lot of different experiments that can clutter up this list. So creating a new folder, and then sort of storing your styles in there just is a really useful addition. Something else that is worth pointing out is that we also added a trash option here. So if you accidentally delete any of your styles, you're able to just come in here and quickly restore them as long as you're within 30 days of them having been deleted. On the right-hand side, you have different links to pages. So right now we're on the styles page, but we also have datasets and tilesets. And I felt starting with datasets is a great place just to sort of, it's one concept of data in Studio. Generally, if you're using a dataset, you'll be working with smaller files with few features. And a specific distinction is ones that you want to modify using the Studio interface. They can be a great way to create your own data manually using the provided tools, or you can, so we have the option to create a new data set, which would be a blank data set, or upload out of these three formats, GeoJSON, JSON, and CSV. However, these, the files you upload here would be limited to 5 megabytes in size. And one thing sort of just as a very quick getting started thing in Studio is that you might want to add, you might not have a large comprehensive data set. You might just want to add a single market or sort of store location marker. So that's one use of data sets. So here we're just going to create store location data set. This will be a blank data set. This interface allows you to draw a point, draw a line, or draw a polygon. There's also a geocoder where you can search different sort of points of interest or locations. So I'm based in Toronto, and around the corner for me is the St. Lawrence Market. And what this allows is just to quickly go from that global view, zoom down into a city view. And for example, we might want to just place a marker. This market is made up of different stalls. So, we do have all of this data available that we'll get into in a little bit in this Mapbox tile set, but we might want to, for example, just add a specific marker point here. Once you've created, sort of clicked on the point icon, you've placed it, you have the ability to grab, drag around, and then start adding properties. And these properties would be useful for styling your data, but also in this example, a little bit later, I'll use it to add a name, and we'll use this just to create a label above this marker point. And I'm not going to sort of go into, it's just a generic market store location, but once I've added that, I can save it. This dialog just explains sort of different modifications you've made to your map. So right now we've just added 1 point. I can save it. One distinction to make is if you're used to viewing and modifying your data in external GIS, you're less likely to need or use a data set. These are really for quick edits, quick modifications directly within Studio. One thing that is a requirement for loading data into a style is that you cannot just load these data sets directly. They do have to be converted to a tile set. So we'll get into what are tile sets next, but I'm just going to quickly go and export this to a tile set. Just going to keep the same name I've given it and export.
Hey, Jonathan, real quick, David in the chat asks, is there a way to duplicate a polygon, or does this need to be done elsewhere? He said in GIS, but does that have to be done outside of this tool?
I actually do not believe that we have the ability in this tool to duplicate a feature. Yeah, that's not something that I've done.
Yeah, one thing you might be able to do is export it as GeoJSON and then just copy and paste the actual underlying GeoJSON code. Or like you said, you can do it in other external tools.
Yes. And it's just worth sort of considering before you create too much of your own data. One of the great features of using Mapbox and Studio is that there's a wealth of data for you to get started creating and designing your own map styles for free. That covers the entire world. So before you even need to think about uploading your own data or creating it, it's worth exploring what's available to use. There's two easy ways to do this. One is the core style templates, which we'll explore in a minute. But there's also these Mapbox tile sets under the tile set section. And in this list, we can find all of the Mapbox provided vector tile sets that include geometries and metadata that are available for you to use in styles. Some of these tile sets contain data related to specific features like country boundaries. But we also have Mapbox Street version 8, which is a larger collection, and that includes things like roadways, terrain, more localized administrative boundaries, building footprints, land use, classifications. And what you can do from here is just see a fairly overwhelming overview of what's contained inside this tile set. We just have this viewer that allows you to drill down, navigate to a location you're familiar with. And as you're hovering over the tile set, you can see the different features that intersect with your mouse cursor. So here we have a point of interest label and a land use, and we can drill down into that point of interest label. Is it theater? Well, this is all the metadata that's associated with it, and then the land use layer. Just need to move this slightly. Another great resource just to sort of explore these data sets is the reference page for each of these tile sets. And this provides sort of a comprehensive overview of another quick view of what's inside the tile sets. There's multiple different data sources for the tile sets. And that's, a lot of it's based off of OpenStreetMap, but it also, based on location, comes from other data sources. And one of the great things using these tile sets is that they receive regular data updates with new information as it becomes available and as existing information is improved. So if you're creating your styles using this, it stays up to date and current as Mapbox regularly updates the data in the tile sets. So as I mentioned, we created a data set. In order to load this into a style, it will need to be in the tile set format. I just converted that with the click of a button, and here we have that single market store location in a tile set, so that's ready to use and import into a style. One thing that's nice with tile sets, especially using them in Studio, is that there is a larger file size limit. So if we go to new tile sets, we see the different file formats that are supported in uploading here. So we do have additional support for other formats, but we also have just larger file sizes that we support. The limitation with Studio is that you have up to 300 megabytes. There are options for larger tile sets using Mapbox Tile Service and the Uploads API. But that's a bit outside of this webinar, so we're just going to focus on UI options. And
quick question for you. So is it possible, this one's actually just from me, but is it possible right now to update the data set that's behind this tile set and have it actually like cascade into the tile set, or do I have to do that manually?
In terms of the store one that I created, or?
Yes, like if I want to add, a few more stores to it, will that update automatically the tile set, or
no? You will have to go back to this view and add the additional stores. But what we can do is when you export to a tile set, we can just update that connected tile set. So modify your data set and then directly update. And that's a a great point that if you have a tile set set up and you've added it to your style, you notice that there's some, right now I just uploaded a GeoJSON of city wards in City of Toronto, and I might notice that there's some data issues with the boundaries or even some of the attributes. it's a larger data set that I would more likely work with an external GIS. But what you can do here is just click replace, and from your external GIS, re-upload, and it will just overwrite the existing data in this tile set. So there's no sort of having to add and remove it from your style. It's just directly linked. So that sort of gets into your question, Chris, around you are able to update the data in the tile sets.
Awesome. We have another question from the chat. So Kevin asks, is there a way to report inaccurate data that we might come across? I'm going to paste a link to the Contribute app in the chat. But I don't know if you want to field that, because you probably know more about how the data makes its way into the system.
Yeah, no, that Contribute is a link is a great resource. It allows us to sort of review and investigate any issues, and then I'm not sure exactly the frequency of updates, but once you've updated something, another option is also updating directly in OpenStreetMap, because that typically will make its way over a short period of time into the basement, like tile sets as well.
Yeah, I'll throw in, OpenStreetMap is one of many sources that go into these tile sets. So if you add, if you flag something on the Contribute app, which I just shared, if it is an OpenStreetMap issue, somebody on our team will end up going in to make that change after they investigate it a little bit. And if it's from another source, there's different pipelines for how that gets updated, but Contribute is the best way to report stuff to us.
And this is just an example of when you upload your data through that interface, it's converted to a vector tile, which is just a really useful and efficient format of delivering map data to web and mobile applications. So the vector tile consists of geographic data that you have, and then it's divided into small uniform tiles, which can be requested and rendered on the client application. Each of the tiles can contain a set of vector features, including points, lines, and polygons. But if you're just using the Studio interface, you're just going to be limited to the data contained in the file that you've uploaded. But great thing about vector tiles is that they are small, and you only need to request the specific area you're interested in. So you're not requesting entire data set. There's a lot of flexibility in how data is displayed. So we'll look at setting up static base maps, but on the client end, it is possible to modify the styling on the fly using the SDKs and APIs, so that it doesn't have to stay the same as the initial default view that you've set up. And there's also the ability to filter and query data on the client side. So data that's is contained in the vector tiles that don't have to all being showed. You are able to create filters just to show a subset. So just jumping back to the styles section, and getting into actually creating a style. We have the new styles button. There's 5 different core styles, and 2 of these do have variations. So you do have a wealth of different default templates to start working with. If you've played around with the API and examples, you're likely to have seen these mentioned in the API documentation, but they're typically referenced as streets version 12, outdoors version 12, and you'll see them in the example documentation here. And what you might have sort of considered is that in this example, it's using a different projection, and that's being set directly in the code. You might want to just modify it directly in Studio. So those references that we just saw are exactly these templates that we have here in the viewer. So these core styles have been designed by Mapbox designers just to meet the broadest range of customer use cases. And we did completely redesign some of them in November, and that happens from time to time just to meet market needs and add any data layers that we think is useful and interesting for customers. And one of the biggest things in the update in November was setting the default projection to the globe projection. So all of these, as you jump through, you can see previews in different locations in the world, trying to highlight sort of what we believe are great showcases for the styles, but they are all using the globe projection. So this dialog just allows you to select whichever one you want to modify. If you're interested in modifying streets, you select it and then customize streets. Then these templates are a really great resource to get started fast. They provide a wealth of already styled data from this low zoom all the way out at the globe view to high zooms when you're really close down at street level. And it's likely you can find a similar setup in the core styles to copy to look for similar styling in your own styles. So we'll get into sort of layer view in a bit, but they're a great, for myself, sort of over the years, they've been a great way just to understand how, best practices for styling data, different tips and tricks for styling data. So really great place for a beginner starting out just to jump in, have something already pre-built, but that you can start modifying yourself and learn from. Each of the core styles have different purposes. So, some are more detailed and colorful than others, and there's just different opportunities to customize for your own use. This streets style is colorful palette and easy to view points of interest. Detailed layers are helpful for pedestrians and tourists, just to navigate unfamiliar territories with a focus on roads and transit networks. Monochrome is another option, and this is just really great for data visualization, or you need a simple canvas to style with maximum contrast against your own custom data. We have, I think probably easier from this view, outdoors, which general purpose map focus on wilderness locations, and it's just really easy to distinguish paths, trails, and tracks, and topology. As you zoom in, we have things like mountain peak icons, and also the contour lines for ability to just understand the topology in an area. Our navigation styles have two variants, a night and a day. And these are just sort of basic templates with the automotive focus. And then satellite streets is a hybrid base map that combines satellite imagery with vector data from Mapbox streets. So you have points of interest data, but using the sort of colorful, beautiful satellite imagery base map. So getting into a style and modifying it, the default view here is the components list. And these components just provide defaults that the designers have set, but there are quick and easy ways to modify those defaults using dropdowns, sliders, and toggles. So administrative boundaries would be the country boundaries and sort of state and province boundaries. Different grouping as controls sort of modify different properties and different layers. Sometimes it requires a bit of experimentation, but other times, it's worth just reading the tooltips to understand. You can turn on and off a country boundary. You could modify its width. And as you sort of get closer, zoom in and out, you can see it just saves you time going through having to individually modify multiple layers. Because in this case, with the admin boundary, we actually have two separate line layers, the one that appears in front and then the mask that appears in the back. One sort of interesting and fun thing to do is just toggle on 3D buildings. So by default, they are flat and 2D, but we have just an easy toggle if you want 3D or 2D. And these controls sort of, there's a wealth of different layers behind the scenes that are being modified, but these components just try and make it a lot more accessible and quick to edit. And at the bottom of this list, we have colors, and each of these colors do correspond to layer groupings. So we have administrative boundaries where we have a single purple color, but there are different colors actually being applied to the various layers in this component grouping. So if we want to just modify this to something other than the default purple, have something darker, there's logic in here that is modifying the colors across the spectrum that are applied to each of those layers in the grouping. So you are actually modifying several different layers color using a single input. And this is really sort of fun in the monochrome styles where we just have a single base color. And what you're able to do is come into here using this single base color. You're able to sort of just modify it on the fly, and behind the scenes, there's logic that's applying different color shades to every layer. Right here, we don't have broken out by administrative boundary, building, everything else. This is just one color to overall style the entire style. So this is sort of behind the scenes view, and what we tried to sort of remove complexity from by creating components is layers. And these layers, we have this layer list, and there's the individual layers ordered from top to bottom in the order that they're layered in the style. So when you select an individual layer, you'll see the paint properties that have been set, like color, opacity, font, and size. And there are a significant amount of different properties and options that you can modify here. So it can be quite overwhelming, and it really is just something that over time, you become more familiar with as needs arise, as you sort of decide, okay, I need to modify this separate from everything else. I have a very specific color that I want to apply. As these are the styles using components, you have the option to sort of go in here, override, modify that color, and just experiment with that specific color. So this is our consonant labels that you can style now individual of everything else. And if you decide sort of the modifications you don't like, you can just click revert, and it goes back to the sort of core default style colors that our designers have come up with.
Quick question, Jonathan, from the chat. Shin asks, can we control the shading effect of the 3D buildings that you showed earlier?
I can go back to that style. So there is a single color, but there is also lighting in the, go quickly, building extrusions. You can apply a pattern, and there is overall lighting that you can apply. And this is sort of based on position of light source. So this would adjust sort of the darkness that you see on each of the sides here. It's, sort of, there's various different ways that you could modify it. But the concept here really is that it's a flat footprint that's just extruded to a height, and they're sort of designed to be a simple representation of the built environment, not a fully 3D detailed view of the buildings.
Although we do have some new innovations in 3D coming out later this year, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be very exciting.
interesting, like sort of, yeah, those are the templates that are, actually, sorry, just thinking. So one of the things that I find really useful is just sort of looking at how designers have set up the styling in these layers, going back to the layers list. We have things like categorical styling for our line cover layer. And that layer is sort of, what covers the entire globe here. Distinction in wooded area to have a slightly different green, snow areas to have a bluer tint, and then fallback or all of the other properties in this layer that just get this one fallback value. So we can see that there's additional attributes that we could style differently. So scrub, grass, and crop would be styled using this fallback. But the sort of fun part here is that you can also explore expression view. It's not always the easiest thing to grasp for people getting started out, but this is just what the underlying code looks like to define what this style looks like. So as you are sort of getting more familiar with designing your maps and further along with, maybe you don't want it's sort of a modification on the client side on the fly, you can just come in here and start to explore some of the expressions that have been set up by designers. We have, this is categorical data, but there's also for zoom ranges, and you can just start to play around and explore how those are set up and what they could look like. And this details panel just provides the paint property. So we know it's a paint property and the property name that you would want to use if you're interacting with the API.
I would love to just throw in a quick, note that a lot of times when we show, Mapbox client-side tools, the hello world just is a base map, and you kind of gloss over that and start adding interactivity and adding your own data. But we shouldn't gloss over it. And I think a fun thing to do is just, you can see how much complexity goes into all these base maps or these styles. And as you said, like exploring kind of decisions that were made for what to show at what zoom level and how things transition in and out is not only a great way to understand like what is possible with the styling spec and like, things that you could actually also build on your own, but just to kind of get into the brains also of you and your team of like, why did they make these decisions? And like, there's a lot to learn there, and you can see like many thousands of like discrete customizations go into making these maps. So it's really awesome. And all that is, available with just a few lines of code to get you moving. So which is pretty great.
Yeah, and it is sort of worth mentioning that they're not always set up purely for stylistic reasons. There's a lot of thought that goes into performance as well, when to show different layers and features, because if it's a very dense detailed layer and you show it when significant amount of features are on the screen, it can affect the performance. So there's a lot of testing and experimentation that goes into it on the design side, just to ensure that it stylistically looks good, but also is performant.
Awesome.
The other thing just to touch on is that we do have a blank style, and this really is just a blank canvas. But what I think is really cool is working with these components is that we can quickly just build out a map. You can go to the core styles and start reducing components and layers that you might not want, but this is the alternative, is just maybe I want a map that has some land and water. We can just, as you add this, multiple different layers are added, and there are images associated with this for icons, but we have a single color that you can start modifying what's being added, but we can go to manage colors, water, and this list of managed colors gets populated the more components you start adding to your map. But in this example, I want water to look different from everything else. So adding a blue here, for example, we're just modifying the base a little bit more, likely to want administrative boundaries. You can also add in road network. And this isn't sort of, you are starting at a very different point from the core styles, but it just gives you this very quick way of starting to organize using existing data and just quickly throw together a map. My intention here is that I want to add in the point of interest that I'd created. So right now we have a distinction between water in the blue, and then everything else is still just being added to the base. And we can lighten that up. We can make it darker, and just programmatically in the back end, the studio is just trying to create different colors for all of those different layers that have been added in the components to sort of make them visible and legible. So yeah, one of the things that we did do was we created that data set. We converted it to a tile set. In order to add your own data, you're going through, because it's just a very basic point of interest layer, it's just layers and add a new layer. And from here, we have the source that we need to define. So I have store location, market store, some of my other examples that I created before this, but just add that in. We're going to just want to represent it as a circle. And as you can see here, we have that point that I added previously. In the components, might not want things like house numbers, so we can modify that really quickly through the components. And when I added in this new layer, it's being added to the top of the layered list. So this will sort of render above every other layer that appears in this list. We can set a color. I'm just using a circle right now to represent this point. They're really sort of quick ways to get something on the map, but you could represent this with a symbol as well. Just set stroke width, so it just stands out a bit more from the background. And if we wanted to add a label to this, just increase the size of it. What we want to do is add a separate, same data source. So this is an active source in the map, but we want to select it again. And this time we're going to use a symbol, and this just allows us to add an icon or text label. And in this case, we want to use the name field that we'd added to this. So this is our market store location. We now have a name. We can distinguish this by modifying that this is the label. You can just sort of grab the color and have a similar color. We sort of add a halo and a width to that halo. And this is really sort of, it gets more complicated, but as you're sort of going through here, you could apply an icon. These icons are all loaded in because we've loaded in the separate components. But because this is just text, we just want to have an offset. So it can be offset above or below the point, but we're just using a text offset. So if you're looking at different pitches and views, it's just correlation from that center point in data. It's just loaded on the map now. So like getting into, you've made modifications to a style. Once you're happy with the new style, you can publish it. The publish button's in the top right location of your map. And this is a blank style, so current view before I make any modifications is blank, but this is after we've added all of the data and that location. And once it's published, we have the option to, there's the option to share. So you can just grab that link and share it with anyone. Something to consider with this is that any changes, so from this link, any changes you make to your style here and publish again will be published to that shared link. So there's no concept of versioning of those links. It really is just the latest published modifications you've made to your style here. But what's also really useful from the share view is the style URL. And these styles are created for mobile and web maps using the mobile SDKs and the JavaScript API. It's a single style that you can create and set across all of those different platforms. You don't need to create something separate for mobile or something separate for web. You can publish your changes directly in Studio here, and because you're using the style URL now to reference in your application, it just will always receive the latest updates you published, and yeah, you really don't need to create something separate. And then just final sort of interesting way of quickly getting started with Studio is that we do have this gallery page. And these are just sort of experiments that the designers have sort of made over time for different purposes. But one of the recent things is 3D Globe styles. When we were coming to the release of 3D Globe, we just wanted some different proof of concepts. And what you can do with these is you can just preview them on this page. Very colorful, very different from those core styles that you can add to your Studio. And by clicking on that button, it brings it directly into your account. And this is not a component-based style. It's a layer-based style. So, and there's just a few number of layers making up that style, but also just a fun way of seeing what are the different properties and different things that are being added to the style to sort of make it look like this. That is everything that I've prepared today, and love if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, so if you have questions, so thank you, Jonathan. And yeah, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask them in the chat. I'll start actually with one, because I'm just curious if you have, a thought or response on like how, or maybe you can just talk a bit about how, how people use Studio in their workflow. Like if we take a step back and say we're building an application or a mobile app, would you say this is something that is mostly done by the designer and handed off to the engineers, once it's ready, or is it like an ongoing thing? Like, I don't know, any thoughts on how this gets used by some of our customers? Sure.
I think it really depends on the end user. We have a number of customers that are frequently updating the styles, frequently making modifications as maybe their application evolves. But it is also a case that you can just kind of create, set, and forget. So the underlying data is updated because if you're using the Mapbox Tilesets, but the actual styling itself, if it matches your requirements and your the style of your app, it really doesn't require much maintenance or any maintenance to create them, and just not really think about them. And it's nice because we have all of these core styles that you can just reference directly with the styles API. But there might be something that just clashes with any overlay, or something that you really the more you dig into the components, there's things like highway shield density, and it could just be a case that you find that there's too many shields, so you can just quickly modify it. So you just instantly, after publishing that, have something that might just improve the original style, how you intend to use it in your application.
Sure, and I'll share from personal experience. Mostly building web applications. Most of the time, I'm doing lots of other interactivity on the client, and I'll end up opening up Studio like later in the process when things are more developed with the app itself, and then those are I consider those to be like finishing touches as I interact with my app, and I want to like make sure that these labels are too busy right now, given whatever else I'm trying to show on the screen. So I might remove some labels or remove all labels. I also would share that like a lot of students of mine and like other people I've interacted with, oftentimes they're using a core style and don't really want to change it, but they do want to remove layers in the browser. And sometimes I think that can cause a little like flash where the thing you're seeing is there and then you immediately remove it. It's not noticeable by a lot of people, but like, this gives you the opportunity to just come in and like, just make sure they're just not there at all. And they never show up on the screen. So, lots of different ways that this can interplay with your client side, interactions and your application that you're building. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. So, see, here's one right when I say we're about to wrap. Okay, so David says, thank you for going through everything. Very informative. Actually, is there, he says, is there any route for getting assistance in getting data into the Mapbox system? Many thanks. So we do have support, paid support, and then we also have our developer Discord. So I think if you have a specific question, you can drop it into there. You also have Stack Overflow, which a lot of people monitor and can throw in with answers to. So we can't guarantee a response on Discord, but that's a great place to start. And maybe others in the community can help out. And if I see your question and it's something I can help with, I'll definitely help as well. Another question was, can we access the recording of this talk? Yes, this will be on YouTube most likely tomorrow. So check out our Mapbox YouTube channel, and you can also see the previous webinars in this series. So we've done 3 episodes on getting started with Mapbox GL.js, and we just finished 2 episodes on getting started with the the Maps SDK for iOS. And I think after this, we're in maybe 1 or 2 weeks, we're going to be starting with Maps SDK for Android. One more question is Mapbox working properly only with USA maps? Go ahead, Jonathan, if you want to field that one.
No, it is I sort of just biased to sort of North America at the moment, but we do, across the world, there is, everywhere has data, maybe some places a bit more complete than others, but even localized labels in countries, if you do want to sort of modify the default language that you display your labels. So it is an entire world if you're using those Mapbox based tile sets.
Excellent. So last question was, are recordings from previous sessions accessible? Yes, they're on YouTube. So just go on YouTube and find the Mapbox channel, and you'll be able to find all the previous recordings along with lots of other things. So I think that'll wrap it up for today. So I want to thank Jonathan for coming on the show and or the webinar and sharing all of his insights into Studio, which he helps to design and build also. So really appreciate everyone turning in, and look forward to seeing and hearing about what you're building with Mapbox. So thanks so much.
Thanks.